Old School Runescape has been booming in popularity lately, and today I wanted to make a video going over the reasons for that, the history of OSRS periods of popularity, what could happen in the future, and share a theory I have that could be an underlying reason for why this is all happening now. It is Saturday afternoon as I'm recording this video, but even right now, the player population, as I'm recording this, is over 200,000. This number by itself may not mean much, especially if you don't follow the OSRS online player counts, and this may just seem like anecdotal evidence, but we're going to get into that in just a bit here as to like how crazy that is, that there's over 200,000 people online. The whole basis for this video, the most important thing for this video is going to be having a chart that shows the average online player count of OSRS over the years, tracking by the weeks and the months and so on. And there's this website called Misplaced Items. Flashbang warning, because I don't think the site has a dark mode. And this is where the chart is going to be. First thing I'm going to do is switch the granularity to week. I think it's an easier way to look at the graph. And then there's three lines here. We have the RS3 player count as the yellow line, the OSRS player count as the blue line, and then the red is combined. You can get rid of the totals though with display. We're going to get rid of that to clean it up a little bit. So here's what we got here. The blue line is OSRS, the yellow line is RS3. I'm not really going to be talking about RS3, but it could be nice to like see parts of it to have a reference for OSRS growing while RS3 is staying pretty constant over the years. And there's no way to remove the yellow line for RS3 anyways. And then whenever you hover over a certain part on here, you'll notice in the top left, it shows what the numbers are for whatever area that you're hovering over. You can also change the display to show peak rather than average, but I think it's better to show the average because it shows less outliers and it's overall a smoother chart to look at. I do want to point out that on the RuneScape 3 website, which is runescape.com, the online player count that they show here, this is always adding up RuneScape 3 and OSRS. So there's like a bit over 200k players on OSRS, which means there's a bit under 30k players on RS3 at the moment. It's something they've pretty much always done. They just add them together on here. So this is the average online player count. Each data point is 1 week on here. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of OSRS in February of 2013. And you gotta keep in mind when we're talking about averages, this includes the whole entire week. So the lowest of every day, the peak of every day, and everything in between. This is the average. When I got the idea to make this video a few days ago, we did not have this most recent data point that showed us as being at all-time high player counts. We were down over here, so it's kind of good timing. We are gonna be focusing on the blue line for OSRS, so don't really pay attention to the yellow line. Now the first thing you may notice when you look at this chart is there's a bunch of spikes all over the place. And most of these spikes correspond to in-game updates or seasonal events. The previous spike was from Leagues 5, the spike before that was from Leagues 4, the spike before that was from Leagues 3, this one was from the release of Group Ironman mode, before that we had Leagues 2, prior to that actually was not an in-game event, this was early 2020, which we all know what happened there, and as you can see that brought a lot of players into the game. In fact, Leagues 1 was a very small spike right down here, but that was Leagues 1. Over here, we have the release of mobile coming out in October of 2018. And before that, we have this increase in the player base, which was due to a few reasons. It was free-to-play coming out, it was bonds, and the release of the GE is all what happened right here. The thing is, though, for most of these spikes, they were short-lived, which makes sense for a seasonal game mode, right? In fact, it was like just a couple weeks of the game mode, even though the game modes, most of the leagues were like 2 months long. But what we're going through right now with this slow grind up seems a little bit different compared to what's happened in the past with these spikes because, I mean, first off, there's a very clear narrative to go with them. It's just a seasonal game mode, and we don't see the same kind of slow grind up that we're having now. You know, there might have been hype for the week before the league came out, then the initial 1 to 2 weeks of the league, and then it ultimately went back down. And actually, in almost every instance of leagues, it goes down lower than where the player count was before the league, which if you've ever played in the leagues before, it kind of makes sense because a lot of people get burned out immediately after the league and they take their usual couple months break before coming back to OSRS. So most of these spikes happen practically overnight over the course of like 1 to 2 weeks before hitting a fast peak. This current grind up that we've been going through, this started the week of February 5th. That's the low right here. So it's been almost 6 months straight of grinding up, which is very different from every other instance. I've been playing OSRS since the very day of release. I have not taken any breaks from the game. I started RuneScape well before OSRS, but I've been playing OSRS since the day of release. I've seen all this stuff occur and happen in real time, and if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know I don't really say this very often or say this lightly, but this time really does feel different. It feels different from all these prior spikes that we've had in the past. Well, not only does it feel different, it is different because, like I just said, we've been grinding straight up for the most part, minus, we'll just forget about that month right there, but pretty much straight up for the last 6 months straight, whereas most of these other spikes were very short-lived. We have 2 or 3-ish kind of outliers here. We have the 2021, the release of mobile in October 2018, and then the 2015 one with free-to-play bonds and the GE that kind of stand out from the others because these were not seasonal in-game events. In 2020, we had the thing that happened, but ultimately it did go back down. In 2018, we had mobile come out. Ultimately, it came back down. In 2015, it's a little bit different, but you could probably argue that because of the release of free-to-play, it brought a lot of bots into the game and probably just free-to-play players in general that formed a new base from there that did not ever go back down to the 2014 levels. But you may notice there's kind of different bases that have formed throughout the years. Like at the start here you have, I mean, this was like a stock chart, you may call this like the initial capitalization phase where you're finding like the base amount of players in the game. I mean, it was really sad over here with like an average of 10k players online. There was an initial base, then you have this spike up from free-to-play bonds and GE, which formed another base. And you have mobile and all the other things that happened here that formed another base. There's another expansionary phase once again in 2022/2023 that you could say formed another base here. And it seems like we're once again going through another expansionary phase, although this expansion is a lot faster than the previous expansions that we've had. If this is an expansionary phase, like you could say this one was and this one was, the angle of attack would be a lot steeper here, which would probably even trick you into thinking that there's some kind of seasonal event going on, but this time does feel different, and that's kind of why I'm making this video, because this is not the same kind of spikes that we've had in the past. And I know it's kind of hand-wavy using like stock market technical analysis on here saying there's like bases being formed because it's like a rotating group of players, you know, but I'm a big math guy. I really love math, and I do truly believe that a chart like this or graphed out data like this is truly like human emotions or human nature graphed out. And I think there is at least something to these types of like bases and peaks that form, and the type of analysis you can do that comes along with that. Maybe you could say it's like the dude version of astrology, but I find this stuff so interesting. If you take a step back and just look at the chart as a whole, you will notice that the average online player count does trend upwards over the long term. And what are the reasons for that? Why does the game keep growing over the long term? I mean, there's a bunch of reasons. First off, I mean, the base reason is that it's just a good game. There's constant updates. The devs listen and interact with the player base, which I don't think you get with a lot of other games. There's no microtransactions except for bonds, which are like the least invasive type of MTX that you could have, and arguably it's even a good thing because it allows people that aren't well off in real life to have membership in the game. That's a whole separate topic for a different video though. There's a steady progression in the game. There's always something more to do, and I mean, if you're watching this video, I don't have to convince you that OSRS is a good game. And that reason alone, I think, is why there's always higher base player counts being formed even after short-term hype peaks of the game. Because even when there are a lot of tourists that come into the game temporarily, there's always going to be at least some people that stick around for the long term after those events are over. The next reason for the long-term growth is because of the advertising that Jagex has done. I've seen OSRS ads everywhere, like they have them on YouTube, Reddit, Instagram, and so on. And they've even sponsored creators, both from OSRS and from other games, to promote upcoming events or just the game in general. And on the topic of creators, that's another big one. The reach that creators have is insane. Like for YouTubers that get, say, 50 to 100k views per video, that is so many people. That would fill up almost any sports stadium that exists. And not all those viewers even play OSRS. There's definitely a large group of viewers that either play different games, or they used to play OSRS, or they play RS3, or they maybe only play OSRS a few months a year before they become convinced to come back each time. And the more they see these videos, the more likely they'll be to eventually give in and try the game out or come back to the game. Then you have word of mouth. OSRS is a very social and multiplayer game, and say you have one person telling their friends to play, then each of those friends will tell their own group of friends to play, and eventually the player base is at 1 quadrillion because that's how exponential growth works or something. The growth of social media also has an impact, Because, sometimes tweets or Reddit posts or YouTube videos can pop off and hit the big algorithm and go outside the OSRS category where it reaches new people. That happens every day. It brings more people into the OSRS sphere of influence. Then those people start interacting with OSRS posts and maybe even playing the game, and it builds up that influence even more. So like another example would be like maybe over time the average OSRS tweet could go from like 10 likes to 20 likes to 50 likes to 100 likes. The community just keeps growing bigger. It's snowballing bigger and bigger, and that manifests even more people to fall into that sphere of influence of OSRS. This is by no means a complete comprehensive list of every factor that causes OSRS to grow, but I think you get the general ideas that these are some of the big factors that cause the snowballing growth of the game over the long term. Which leads us into the next question: what has caused the more recent growth that we've been seeing? I think there's one main obvious reason that has been causing the growth recently, which is, most of you probably know this unless you've been really out of the loop for the last month. There's been a lot of World of Warcraft players that have been coming over and playing OSRS. A lot of really big World of Warcraft players. You can see right here I typed WoW player tries OSRS. Sodapoppin has been playing OSRS, which is absolutely insane, the reach that he has. Here's Sodapoppin's Twitch tracker. Seeing like 10,000 plus players on an OSRS live stream that's not Deadman mode or any kind of special event, just an average OSRS stream, is absolutely insane. But once again, going back to the whole snowballing idea, all it takes is one or two of the bigger World of Warcraft players to try out OSRS, and once a couple of them try them out, it could convince a couple more, which is exactly what happened. More and more WoW players have been trying out OSRS, and beyond that, it's been bringing not just WoW players, but people from other games too, like League of Legends, Minecraft, and even if they get a similar amount of views to OSRS YouTubers, the thing is, they're from a different category. Like maybe for OSRS players or OSRS creators, maybe 90% of the viewers already either play the game or have decided not to, or already in the process of being convinced to play. Meanwhile, the people that watch these WoW players, it's probably the reverse. Maybe only 10% of their viewers play OSRS or have ever actively considered trying it out in the past. So 100k views on a WoW player's video brings in a lot more new people than 100k views from an OSRS YouTuber's video. And I know a lot of the views that WoW players are getting are coming from OSRS players that are now watching them. But overall, it should still be a much higher percentage of non-OSRS players that are watching the WoW players now play OSRS than non-OSRS players that watch OSRS YouTubers. And now let's go and tie that back into social media. Now you have people that are posting these clips and posting memes about these WoW players. Because dude, like 10,000 likes, that is a lot of likes for a post in the OSRS subreddit. This is the kind of thing that would appear to people that maybe aren't subscribed or following this. The stuff is really hype. It gets people posting about it. It builds up a sense of community, and really, community is probably the most important aspect of OSRS that has held it together since the very beginning. And when you have a strong, tight-knit community, it makes people want to stick around longer and become a part of that community, which again, that just leads to even more snowballing because you're growing that base group of players that are sticking around for the long term. I don't exactly follow all the WoW stuff, so I don't know the exact reasoning behind why they switched to RuneScape. I think it has something to do with losing their progress from different seasons, and they liked the idea of RuneScape being permanent progress. I'm sure there's multiple other reasons too, but basically WoW players are here playing OSRS right now. A lot of them may go back to WoW when there's new seasons or expansions or whatever they are. Please forgive me, I have no idea how the game itself, how WoW works, but maybe some of those WoW creators will stick around playing OSRs for the long term. Regardless of what happens or how many of them go back to WoW, they've brought a new group of people into OSRS. And a percentage of those people that they've brought some interest to will stick around OSRS for the long term. I do think that that is the main cause of the recent snowballing growth, but I do want to present another theory. And this isn't meant to put down or minimize what the WoW players have done for the game, but I want to present this as an underlying reason for why this is all happening specifically now. And this is also going to be very hand-wavy, but I want to present it as an idea anyways because I think it's interesting and I don't know if I've seen anyone else talk about this before, and that is pop culture cycles. Now, I think generally in different industries, 20 years is considered like a normal cycle for like fashion and entertainment, nostalgia, pop culture. I've been looking up, I see a lot of these posts say it's like 25 or 30 years, or like it starts at 20 years and ends at 30 years. And there's a lot of different numbers that people give for the amount of years. But for the sake of this video, I'm picking a number to fit my narrative. Again, this is going to be very hand wavy, but we're going to say that pop culture goes in 20-year cycles. You can go to Google search trends and see when terms were most Googled. And of course, we're going to search up RuneScape to see when was RuneScape most popular in the 2000s. Because Google has data going all the way back to 2004. So we'll open up the data to 04, we'll keep it set to United States. And you can see the search term RuneScape was most popular in July of 2006, and also this is June of 2007. That is when the term RuneScape was searched the most throughout history in the United States. I guess for the sake of completeness, we could search worldwide as well. I don't imagine it's going to change very much. It's very similar. We have late 2006 and late 2007. If you do subscribe to this 20-year pop culture cycle, then that would mean that we're currently right around here. We've just gone through this explosive phase, and we're currently in mid-2005. And if you do want to go by the assumption that this is the narrative that has been playing out and will continue to play out, then here's what we could see. We just had a bunch of big WoW players, and even some like League of Legends, and I think Minecraft players too, that have joined the game, which led to this very steep angle of attack of a lot of players joining all at once as they discover the game for the first time because their favorite YouTuber or streamer has just switched over to playing RuneScape. And this 20-year theory would suggest that we've already had the majority of the big streamers and YouTubers join the game already, and at this point they will continue to make videos and continue to stream, and that will still bring more players in, but not at the same rate that we just saw over the last few months. The angle of attack here is not as steep. It could trickle down to some medium or smaller size creators moving over to OSRS, where they bring their smaller audiences with them, which does still lead to growth. Of course, there's the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed. What about the decline of RuneScape that happened after 2007? Does that mean that OSRS is going to peak in 2027 and then decline from there? The reason for the decline, I'd say, was more artificial reasons rather than players naturally losing interest in the game. The reasons because of the updates that they added to RuneScape. It was just bad decision after bad decision, like the removal of free trade in the wildy, adding more and more microtransactions, the evolution of combat. So many of these things culminated into the player base of RuneScape becoming a shell of its former self, until eventually we got 2007 Scape. 2007 Scape is at least the term that people used more commonly back then, although nowadays people more so call it OSRS, and this is the chart that we have for OSRS. Or maybe 07scape is also a good search term to look at. Let's go back to the chart for RuneScape though. And you may be thinking, wait a second Mudkip, you can't just say that charts are human nature that's converted into numbers and then say the chart is following human nature up until the point that you say it doesn't because it doesn't fit your narrative. And that is true, but like I just said, I don't think this was a natural decline. I think this was decisions made by Jagex that were bad, and 20 years later, hopefully this time is different. Hopefully they've learned from their decisions from 20 years ago, and all the evidence that we have from the updates they've had over the last few years. I think the majority of people like the updates and think that Jagex have been doing a good job. And well, if they didn't do a good job or haven't been doing a good job, we would have been in this phase, this declining phase already, right? So clearly they're doing something right to attract more players into not only trying out the game, but sticking with the game for the long term, because it's just growing, right? It's trending up over the long term. Since the inception of old school RuneScape, Jagex has always been very good at listening to those players. And the players have always done a very good job of being very vocal about the things that they don't like. I think part of that is due to just the maturing of the internet in general. Like, the internet was a very different place 20 years ago. Can you imagine having an interaction with a JMod, like just being able to tweet or being able to go into a Discord server and actually have a realistic chance of a JMod replying to you or listening to your feedback? So I do not think we're gonna have this decline eventually. I am very deterministic about old school RuneScape. I do think that it will continue to trend up over the long term. Of course, realistically, the player count can't just keep going up forever. There is going to eventually be something that happens or a few things that happen where it comes down a little bit. It doesn't have to be like a dramatic immediate decline like that, but at least come down to form a realistic base like we've done here and here and here and here. And maybe the base of where we eventually come back down to will be like where we're at now. Maybe it will be 150,000 players. In the immediate future though, in the short term, there is just so much hype. Everything is snowballing right now. We are like euphoria right now for the OSRS player base. And I do expect it to continue for a little while longer at the very least to go up, but at some point it does have to come back down a little bit because all the new people that are trying the game out, they may discover they don't like the game, or they may get to a point that's slightly grindy and they don't enjoy it anymore, or their friends quit so they quit too. Some of the WoW players are bound to eventually go back to WoW and they'll bring a majority of their audience with them. The hype and FOMO will die down. It is currently summer as well, so maybe, I know the average player age is like 30, so maybe summer break isn't as relevant, but maybe there's some kind of seasonality to this as well. I guess we could look at the, I'm not going to go into all that. We could look at the chart and look at like every January and every July and like see, but we're not going to get into all that. As most of you know, this game does have a way of eventually bringing people back to it. And I want to point out that I think all these WoW players only started playing OSRS in the last like 1 to 2 months, which would have been like, here's the start of June. So this, but even before these last 2 months, it's been like 6 months that the player base has been growing. We had this big uptrend right here, which I think this was before the WoW players joined. Let's enjoy the current success of old school RuneScape right now. It's been absolutely insane and amazing seeing the game somewhat start heading towards the mainstream again. We just had Alan Walker drop a version of Sea Shanty 2 at the Tomorrowland Festival. 11k likes on the official, let me like that myself. But yeah, 20-year pop culture cycle. Just think about some of the things that were popular 20 years ago that seem to have had a resurgence lately. And I know not every industry is going to be 20 years, like fashion may be different than music, which may be different than entertainment. But I just find it really interesting, and I feel like there's got to be something to that. Also, MapleStory, I played MapleStory a little bit as a kid, and I heard that they're going to be releasing a MapleStory Classic. And I heard that they're going to be announcing a date for it at MapleCon later this year, which I think is going to be October is when they're going to be announcing a date. Going back to OSRS though, there's been so many players consistently online. They've already added 10 new worlds. And honestly, that's probably still not even enough because a lot of the worlds still have 1k plus people on them, which is a bit of a problem because the worlds get laggy and resource competition can get tough. I just talked about this in a recent video, but I wouldn't be surprised if they add even more in the future. They're probably just like testing this out for now and seeing if these players stick around. And if they do, I would not be surprised to see more worlds. And I do think a lot of these players are going to stick around. And I do expect us to break all-time high player counts. And to check the all-time high, because this is the average, it's not the actual all-time high, we'd want to check the peak. The all-time high player count, actually, we have not broken yet. That was from the prior league during the week of December 2nd, 2024. If you look on the left, you'll see it was 231k players online. There were so many players consistently online that people's save files were getting messed up, and some people were getting minor rollbacks. They would log out and their accounts would be rolled back by a few minutes. So Jagex had to, I guess, do some kind of update to their infrastructure because we're not used to having that many players online at once. I went to runescape.com on the Wayback Machine because I was curious about previous dates because it does show the online player count for whatever date and time. A lot of them don't load. I don't know if that's because of Wayback Machine or some of these websites are somehow corrupted or something. But here's an example from April 6, 2007. 234k players online. Let's go to the next date and see what's going to be there. May 1st, 07, page not found. Okay, next. Here we have 122k online. I can't really control like what time of day. Here's 107k. I can't control like the time of day or the exact date. We get the archive pages that we get, right? September 6th, 07. This must have been at nighttime. 62k players. It's so cool though looking at the old web pages. Okay, there's 128k people online in October. It's really annoying using Wayback Machine, so you get the idea. I mean, I think we're getting relatively close since the highest we saw in there was 234k online. Just out of curiosity, not really related to the video, but I thought this could be fun to check out. If we go to the earliest date recorded in Wayback Machine, for runescape.com, this would have been August 17th, 2000. What did the website look like back then? Wow, dude, look at that. That's so cool. Coming soon from Jagex Software. Look at that old school, old school RuneScape logo. The freaking ads from the .com bubble. We have these screenshots of the game. There's an old map of the RuneScape world. RuneScape originally released, at least Classic, was January 4th, 2001, which we don't have anything for. The earliest would have been March 1st, 2001. Wow, yeah, I didn't start RuneScape until 2005, so this is completely new to me. What a trip, man. Yeah, unfortunately, I just don't think there's anyone that was tracking the online player counts for RuneScape up until this misplaced item site. I'm very, very thankful for this site. I don't know if there is anywhere else that is currently constantly keeping track of the OSRS online player count. Maybe Jagex is keeping track of it, I don't know, but I love that this is public and constantly keeping track. I love data, I love numbers, I love graphs. I think the best you can really get is either going through Wayback Machine for seeing very specific screenshots or seeing anecdotal evidence by going through old forum messaging boards. And if the site does go down or ever stops keeping track of the info, I would be very sad, and I would very much hope that someone would take the reins of this project. Maybe there's someone already that's doing that, but I personally don't know. So much of RuneScape history has already been lost to time, and the online player counts is another example of that. I'm so glad we have the data, at least going back to February of 2013, and I hope that going forward there will always continue to be people to archive that. Reddit has collectively, apparently, decidedly, called the current era of RuneScape the Platinum Age. I don't know how to feel about that, because that almost sounds like it implies that it can't go further up, so like what would you call it? I guess you call it like Platinum times 2, right? Then you just like keep adding numbers onto that, so... Yeah, Platinum times 1 right now. I made a video with a somewhat similar concept 1 year ago, and if you enjoyed this style of video, you may enjoy that one as well if you haven't seen it, which I'll link in the description. I know all the hype and FOMO can be overwhelming, and the fast pace everything seems to be moving can be discouraging, but don't worry about all that. Just enjoy the game at your own pace as you've always done, and do the things in game that make you happy, because it's a game and games are meant for having fun, and you never know where your adventures may take you. And who knows, maybe you'll end up making some friends that change your life.